And so you have consciousness itself, or being aware, and we're talking about non-duality here, right? Advaita meaning kind of pointing to the fact that things aren't fundamentally divided. And tell me if I'm getting ahead of myself again here, but I wonder if this is the moment where, as in the famous non-dual text, I am that, is it you have the I am, the presence of awareness, and then there's this collapsing that we mentioned earlier, where the identification is with everything that appears in consciousness.
Yes, absolutely. Having traced one's way back in one's experience to one's essential, irreducible self, or if we can call it a self, or being, just the fact of being aware, we then, so to speak, turn around again and face objective experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions. And we recognize that the essential nature of what we are, which we have now discovered to be pure awareness, is the essential nature or the absolute reality of what the world is. And hence this equation, I am that, or in the traditional Christian language, I and my Father are one. What I essentially am and what the ultimate reality of the universe essentially is one. In Buddhism, nirvana, the emptiness I find on the inside of myself, is the reality, is identical to samsara, is the reality of all appearances. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. You find these expressions that, as you rightly say, collapse the apparent distinction between the subject and the object, and that is what the term non-duality refers to, the recognition that a single, infinite and indivisible reality underlies the apparent multiplicity and diversity of objects and selves.
I think, you mentioned that the term reality, that reality is this single, undivided, non-dual thing. But then experientially, I think the subject-object collapse, I guess, is another sense in which one realizes there was a false duality. So you mentioned earlier, if you hear a noise in your house, usually there's a feeling of being a self, the noise being at some distance outside of you, and it kind of, the self having the experience of hearing the object. Whereas in my experience in non-dual states, there's the sound, the bundle of appearances that you identify with as the self, they're all just equal, they're of equal status in consciousness. They're all just they're just immediately here.
Yes.
I feel in my experience, this sense of a loss of the center, a loss of feeling like I'm located inside my head, and instead there just being a unified sphere of awareness in which everything is kind of aware from within inside.
I completely agree. All experience takes place within the open, empty space of awareness, and that awareness cannot be located in experience in the same way that all movies take place on a screen, but the screen is never located as an object in the movie. Or the other analogy, all dreams take place within the dreamer's mind, but the dreamer's mind itself never appears in the dream. That is absolutely true, and not as you refer, as you say, it's not just an idea. It is a felt sense that one loses the sense of being located in and limited to the body. However, one still perceives from through the body. For instance, you are seeing the front of your computer, not the back of it.
Right.
Why is that? It's because I'm not suggesting that you, the one that perceives, is located, but you are, we could put it like this, you, the unlocated perceiver, the unlocated presence of awareness, is perceiving through the object of James's body. That's what enables you to see the front of your computer. In order to see the back of your computer, James's body would have to go around the other side of it. This doesn't mean to say that the real you, the real consciousness, is located in you, or indeed is moving around. It's not. When the when the character that we seem to become in our dream walks down the street, our mind doesn't go anywhere. Our mind is not located in the dreamed world, in the same way that the very consciousness with which each of us are now hearing these words is not located in the world that we perceive. That world is located in it.
Yeah, I think
yes. So you're absolutely right. Yes.
Yes, I think I guess the point I was making is that within this island of experience that you might call James's mind, or the mind associated with this organism, within that, if we just confine our concerns to that sphere, that's where the collapse happens, rather than making a claim. I think, as you kind of point out, we're not saying that suddenly you zoom out and you take on a perspective, you see everything that's happening in the universe. It's still located here.
Exactly. Another way of saying this is that it's not the illusion of separation that disappears, it's the ignorance that disappears. We still seem to see a multiplicity and diversity of objects. If you look around your book, your room, you don't see one homogeneous, uniform object. You see books and pots and pictures and doors, and you see an apparent multiplicity and diversity of objects. If we make a deep investigation of those objects, we find that they are an appearance of a single reality. That recognition doesn't make the illusion of multiplicity and diversity disappear. It's not the illusion that goes. It's the belief that that illusion refers to objects that are real in their own right.
Right. That's an excellent point. I think the distinction between, I guess, the language that resonates with me is talking about maybe the absolute versus the relative. I am relatively separate in that I'm located a different place to you. There are these relative patterns, but we imbue them with a sense of absolute separation, and that's ignorance, as you say, or why you might call it illusion. Yeah, exactly. So it's not that everything collides into a single point. There's still relative separation. But
yes, when you recognize, just to use another analogy, when you recognize that the landscape in the movie is not a three-dimensional landscape, it is a two-dimensional piece of glass. The illusion of the landscape doesn't disappear. The belief that it is a real landscape, and whatever feelings may be attendant on that belief, disappear, but the illusion remains.
Right, and I think the analogy I think you use often is of the play of light in a movie theater on a screen. That you can see from these two perspectives of really believing the certain regions of light to be a human being, and you get kind of engrossed by the drama, and you think you forget that it's just a two-dimensional display of light, and you can switch between those two perspectives.
Yes, if I've understood you correctly, James, you can watch a movie and you can either see a three-dimensional landscape. If you're convinced it is a three-dimensional landscape, it may be necessary to turn the movie off in order to discover that it is a two-dimensional screen. Having discovered it's a two-dimensional screen, one can then turn the movie back on and simultaneously see the screen and the landscape. In fact, even to suggest that one sees them simultaneously is not quite right, because it suggests that there are two things there to be seen at the same time. All we see is the screen, either appearing as the landscape or not. So and this is another way of referring to the absolute, which would be analogous to the screen, and the relative, which would be analogous to the movie. The absolute is not somehow behind the relative in some other location, veiled by it, although it is one's belief that the relative is real in its own right that makes it seem as if the absolute is missing. And once it is clear to us that the image is in fact simply a coloring of the screen, then the relative no longer veils the absolute, it shines with the absolute. all it is a coloring of the absolute.